If you're a real estate investor, odds are at some point you've probably thought, I could manage that property better than that guy, or maybe I should just start my own property management company. Well, you may want to think twice because it was a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging than I could have ever expected. This week on the Mastering Real Estate podcast, we're talking about the roller coaster ride that was starting and running a property management company. You don't want to miss it. Welcome to the Mastering Real Estate podcast. This podcast is for real estate investors and professionals looking to take their real estate game to the next level. Each week, I review the industry's leading real estate books and break down the main lessons that you can apply to your life and business. Then, every other week, I review my own personal lessons learned from flipping over 100 houses and being a full-time real estate investor since 2018. Stay tuned each week so that we can all become masters of real estate together. Back to episode 22 of the Mastering Real Estate podcast. In episodes 18 and 20, I told the story of purchasing a 42 property portfolio in Birmingham, Alabama. By the way, that's a crazy story, and you should go listen to those episodes if you haven't already. Anyways, at the end of the day, my business partners and I were left with 11 properties for ourselves, and we sold the other 31 properties to other real estate investors. We all needed someone good to manage these properties now. And over the previous 1 to 2 years, my business partners and I had worked with a couple local property managers, and we just weren't 100% satisfied with the level of service. So we thought we better start our own property management company in order to manage our own properties the way we wanted and provide other investors with the level of service that they desired. Let's just say that it's probably a good thing that we had no idea what we were in for. Before we dive deeper into the story, I'm your host, Maura McGraw. I've been a full-time real estate investor since 2018. I've managed over 100 flips, founded and grew a real estate investment firm, and I live and work in the real estate industry every day. This podcast is made possible by Doratus Properties, my real estate investment firm based in Alabama. Even though the market is crazy, we are still actively looking for properties to flip and add to our rental portfolios. So if you are in the industry and have any properties in the Birmingham, Mobile, or Baldwin County areas, shoot them over to me. I would love to take a look and see if they meet our criteria. We also love to connect with others in the industry. You can connect with us by subscribing to our weekly newsletter, following us on social media, or shoot me an email and let's set up a call. I would love to get to know more of you. Okay, let's get into the story. As you may remember, 3 of us, Danny Gonzalez, Aziz Shannara, and I partnered to take down that 42 property portfolio deal. Also, as you may remember from episode 11, Danny Gonzalez is a real estate broker, and he stepped up to take the lead and serve as the CEO of our new property management company, Freedom Ventures Property Management. While we were finishing up all of our 31 flips and sales from the 42 property portfolio, we were also scrambling to get our new property management business up and running. We had to get an office. In reality, we just carved out a corner of our existing Doratus office and got a key box and some other essentials for the property management business. We also had to get all the legal paperwork taken care of, choose a management software, build a website, get all the keys organized, and about a million other things. If you want to get an idea of how this process started, when we bought the 42 property portfolio, the owners dropped off an old gallon Ziploc bag of all the keys to the properties, and they were all jumbled up. Only some of the keys were labeled. And I think that crusty old bag of jumbled keys could be a metaphor of just how disorganized and harried things felt at the beginning of this journey. Here's a quick overview of what we started with and what we had to do to start the property management company. We started the business with about 50 houses under management in August of 2019. This included the 42 properties from the portfolio deal, as well as the properties in our Doratus portfolio and Danny Gonzalez's rental properties. On one hand, this was really cool that we were starting the business with some decent revenue coming in on day one. On the other hand, we were seriously scrambling to get everything set up for 50 tenants, 35 owners, and a few employees. Looking back, it's hard to believe that we got everything together in such a short period of time. Although there were many bumps in the road, I think that we were all working as hard as possible to make things come together for ourselves and for our clients. And despite many setbacks, we got the bones of the business set up quickly and got to work learning the business of property management. There were seriously countless lessons learned from starting and running a property management company. A personal lesson that I had to learn early on was the importance of followership and knowing when to lead and how to follow. In the Marine Corps and in Doratus Properties, I was very used to being in charge. And especially back in those days, I had a somewhat forceful leadership style, thanks to 10 years in the Marine Corps. However, in this new venture, I was not the leader. Danny was the CEO and the majority owner of the company, and I had to learn to be a follower and a supporter of Danny. I remember a few volatile moments, especially in the first few weeks of starting the property management company, where I butt heads with Danny because he maybe wasn't doing things exactly how I would do them, understandably. This forced me to learn a lot of things. I had to learn how to let go and recognize that I was not in charge of this venture. I also had to learn some humility and realize that my way wasn't always the only or right or best way to do things. Finally, I needed to learn to be a good follower and support Danny in the best way possible as he bore the brunt of trying to build something new and very difficult. This was hard for me because I was used to being in charge and am honestly more comfortable being in charge. But I think it was a great lesson for me, and I think ultimately and hopefully it made me a better leader in the long run. One of my first and biggest takeaways from starting the property management company was the importance of learning to be a good follower and to have humility and tact in order to support the leader. That's being a good follower in many cases is just as important, if not more so, than being a good leader. The next 3 years were a whirlwind and a blur. There was a huge demand for good property management in our area, and our company grew from 50 properties to over 600 units under management in 3 years without any paid marketing. It was seriously crazy. At the time, we were very growth-minded, and we thought that our exponential growth was a great thing, and in some ways it was, until it wasn't. As an entrepreneur, you sometimes occasionally hear people talk about scaling too fast, and until you're actually in that position, you probably think, okay, what a difficult problem to have. We found ourselves in that position. Things were going decently well as we scaled from 0 to 300 units under management. Then, around the 300 mark, all of our systems started to fall apart. Everything that had worked to get us to 300 suddenly didn't work anymore. We could not effectively manage anything anymore, including maintenance, tenant communication, owner communication, leasing, turnovers. It was all starting to blow up. And each of us, all the employees, started to get farther and farther behind with our workloads. The day-to-day started to feel really stressful and overwhelming for all of us. Of course, we hired more people, invested in more systems. Danny joined a high-level mastermind with other property managers, which really helped, and we did make incremental progress. However, at one point, we had to put an intentional halt on our growth and stop accepting any new clients for 3 to 6 months in order to revamp all of our systems. Then, once we had our systems back up and running, we had another huge growth opportunity come along that turned out to be a trap instead of an opportunity. A contact of mine approached me in 2021 to take over the management of 3 apartment complexes in Mobile with about 150 units. I was a little hesitant at first, but I thought that it could be a good opportunity for the company. The whole team and I talked about it for a while, and ultimately we decided to go for it. In hindsight, that was a mistake. The next several months of taking over the apartment complexes were terrible. Everything was a mess, from the records to the conditions of the buildings themselves to doing business in a high crime area. I was the only person actually living near Mobile at the time, so I was running point on the whole project. And to make matters worse, I had recently had my first baby. These apartments were in a rough part of town, and I had to carry a gun and bring my dog with me pretty much everywhere I went. And in just the first few months of managing these apartments, I personally oversaw the eviction of several drug dealers, dealt with several fires, and ultimately had to deal with the horrendous fallout of the entire plumbing system failing and all the pipes bursting in one of the apartment complexes. This was truly a nightmare, and it led to daily interactions with the media, the mayor, and a lot of fallout, as we ultimately had to force all the tenants out of the completely flooded building. A few months in, I found out that I was pregnant with my second baby, my son. And so one day, amidst all the chaos of dealing with this big plumbing disaster, I woke up and realized that I could not do this anymore. The lifestyle of this type of property management was stressful and dangerous, and it was honestly the opposite of the lifestyle I envisioned when I first got into real estate investing. So over the next few weeks and months, I worked with Danny and Aziz to exit out of the property management company and just focus on Doratus. It was a tough decision at the time, and I felt like a bit of a failure and a quitter, but in the long term, it was definitely the right decision, and I am grateful for that decision every day. In conclusion, my second big takeaway from the whole property management experience is that not all growth is good growth, and scaling too fast can be just as deadly as not scaling fast enough. And not all clients are good clients. Overall, it's a lot better to have slower, consistent, and intentional growth than this massive growth, and especially these massive growth spikes. So, and that's what Freedom Ventures is still doing great. It's still thriving today, just I'm not part of it. And the whole team was luckily able to use this lesson, and now they are very selective about the clients they take, the property they take. So their growth is a lot more intentional now, and I think that's led to the overall improvement of the company. So luckily, amidst all the chaos, there is always a silver lining. The next big lesson that I learned from the property management company experience was the downfall of doing too much. And sadly, I would have to learn this particular lesson about the pitfall of doing too much many more times. And if I'm totally honest, I still haven't completely internalized this lesson still to this day, which is frustrating to realize. But anyways, from 2019, I was doing way too much. I was the CEO of Doratus Properties, the COO of Freedom Ventures Property Management. I was also a company commander in the Marine Reserves. And oh yeah, I was also finishing my graduate degree in real estate somewhere in there. So I was doing way too much and not doing anything particularly well. Okay, I do have to cut myself some slack that both of my businesses did grow a lot in those years, and I always made sure to be a decent Marine leader. If I'm honest, what probably suffered the most was my family and my husband. I was always going a million miles an hour, and I seemingly never had time to rest or spend with my husband. And there's probably some deeper stuff behind that behavior, but I'll leave that aside for right now. Anyways, I lost sight of the main reason that I wanted to get into real estate investing in the first place, which was having a free and flexible lifestyle. In typical Maura fashion, things started to implode and I had to make some big changes. I got out of the property management company. I left the Marine Corps completely. I finished graduate school, and I was finally able to just focus mainly on my family and running Doratus Properties. And I felt so much happier and healthier. But still to this day, I have to fight my own instincts to always take on more, do more work, more random projects, etc. I have this horrible tendency to fill my plate to the absolute brim, and it always eventually backfires in some sort of dramatic fashion. And so hopefully, maybe someday I will truly learn my lesson. Some of you might be able to learn from my pain that it's really important to stay focused. Don't spread your attention too thin or too wide, because then you'll end up not doing anything well. And focus on making your core business excellent before expanding into other businesses or other verticals within your business. Doing too much is honestly a recipe for disaster. It's better to just do a few things really well than try to do everything just mediocre. Like I said earlier, I learned endless lessons from my foray into property management. Overall, I'm very grateful for the experience. I learned a ton and am such a better real estate professional for having done it. That being said, I am so much happier now just focusing on my family and being a real estate investor. If you can learn some lessons from today's story, it would probably be these 3 things. Number 1, learn to be a good follower. This is just as important as being a good leader. Number 2, growing too fast can be detrimental to your business. Focus on slower, intentional growth if possible. And number 3, stay focused on your core business and values and resist taking on too much. I want to give a quick thanks to our show sponsor, Doratus Academy. We have a bunch of free investor resources, all of our podcast show notes, and an awesome masterclass about how to get started investing in real estate. And you can see all of that on our website, doratusacademy.com. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Hopefully you found it both entertaining and informative. Next week, we're diving into Ashley Wilson's book, The Only Woman in the Room, Knowledge and Inspiration from 20 Women Real Estate Investors. I'm so excited for this book, and Ashley will actually be joining us to discuss her book and what it's like to oftentimes be the only woman in the room. You definitely don't want to miss it. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. We are a new and growing podcast, so every rating, review, and share helps immensely. Also, make sure that you're following us on YouTube and social media. You'll get a lot more behind the scenes and content there daily. See you in the next one.